Hello guys, welcome back to my channel, and today we are going to make this UI a little bit more beautiful, interaction wise, not visual wise. So this is going to be a two-part video. In this part I'm going to make the interaction a little bit more professional, so the scrolling, the sliding looks a little bit more professional, so we need to do a lot of coding. But in the next part we're going to make this a little bit beautiful visually, right? So that might be not that hard to do for a lot of people, but I'll show that tutorial anyway if anyone get interested in that. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is to make this a portrait. It's not important to make it portrait, but I'm making it portrait because the actual app that I am using as a reference, the IKEA Plus app, they use the app as a portrait app, right? And also I feel like using a portrait mode gives us more control over the interaction. You can do a one-hand interaction rather than using your mobile, a landscape orientation. So portrait orientation gives us a one-hand interaction that is good for the user. So that's why we're going to make it a portrait mode. The next thing we need is actually get rid of this container. This was a temporary thing. I am just going to right click and delete this, and in here we are going to create a new UI component, which is going to be the scroll view. So scroll view gives you the ability to like add a lot of contents inside the scroll bar and help you to scroll the content inside it. Okay, we're not going to do any kind of vertical scrolling, so I'm just going to delete that. Then I'm going to click on the scroll view, go to this rect tool in the rect transform, click on there. I'm going to hold shift and option. That will give me all this different kind of anchor preset, and I'm going to click on here, right? So that will take the scroll view to the down like center bottom corner of the screen. And I can also do this actually, so it stretch the UI in the bottom corner. So yeah, so after I am done with that, I am going to add a few contents. So the contents is going to be just the UI buttons, right? So we might want to make it a little bit bigger, the scroll view. So make the scroll view a little bit bigger, as well as the content. So the content should be as the same height like the the scroll view. So I'm going to put both of them as 400. Oh, sorry, 400, and the content should be 400 as well, right? So next we are going to add some content inside this scroll view. To do that, I'm going to right click on here and go to UI, then button, or maybe raw image. I want to make the UI so that the content, like the content holder, automatically like make a layout on this component, right? So what I mean is that if I now add another raw image, as you can see they overlap with each other and you can manually put them aside, but that might not be as precise if we just add a layout here, right? Horizontal layout. So this layout is going to help us to lay out all the contents in the child of this content game object. Okay, I want to make it a center, maybe center left, middle left, and I also need a padding, so I'm just going to put a padding around 40. The raw image looks okay for me now, but the reason behind making it bigger is that you can like change the size of this button as your wish, right? So I'm going to put it somehow around 200 probably, and the height should be 220, or maybe I want it to be square. Okay, I see there's a lot of empty spaces here, so I can just make it a little bit smaller, scroll view first, and make sure the content, yeah, the content fits that. Okay, that's good. So I am happy with this size, and then the next part I need to do is to add a bunch of other raw image. So I'm going to add a few of them. Now in here you can see that the more the more UI elements I'm adding, the area is getting more congested. So there's a few things I need to do to make it not happen. So I'm going to go to the content, make sure the child force expand is not switched on, so they're like this. And then I also need to make sure the spacing between the child has some value. So I'm going to put a value of about 120. That looks good. Well, okay, that's fine. Let's try it out. Let's see what happens if I just add a bunch of elements, and then I'm just gonna play the game. Okay, so as you can see, I cannot slide, right? So it's kind of like elastic, and it's not letting me to do that. The reason behind that is that the content size is not being updated based on the size of these things. So the child, the raw image, there is a lot of raw image inside the content. The content has a lot of children, but the content has not expand itself based on its children, right? If it's not clear yet, I'm just going to uncheck the mask. You can see there's a lot of content here, right? The content ends here, but the box or the rect of this transform, the content transform ends here. So we need to make it so that it goes until the end of the um, of all the children. So now if I make it bigger like this, and now I try, as you can see, I can scroll, right? Okay, so how can we do that? So we can basically add a filter. We can add a content filter, and we can say that the horizontal size should be the preferred size. And if we do that, it automatically takes the maximum size that it needs based on its children, right? Now if I add another one, as you can see, it's getting bigger and bigger. If I delete stuff, it's getting smaller. So yeah, so that is how we can manage these contents, right, inside the viewport. What's next? The next thing I want to do is that I want to add some buttons here, right? So because they are all raw image that doesn't have any button, so I need a button, and I also need the button manager. Okay, that's good. But this, by this point, you can think about that the UI is done. We can actually work with it, and it looks not that bad. It's actually looks pretty good, but I want more from this UI, so I'm going to add a few more changes into this, right? um, so the first thing I want is that whenever I'm scrolling, the center of this buttons should get bigger, right? So there should be somehow there should be a zoom or something like that, so that will make this content zoom, and we can see that okay, this is the item in focus. And later on, when we are changing stuff dynamically, we can say that the one which is currently focused, change the furniture with that one, right? So we can work on that later on, but currently we can use a interaction so that it gives you a zoom in effect on the center UI in this list. So that is the next thing we are going to do. Okay, so to do that, we're going to need a new script. So I'm going to right click here, create a new C# script. I'm going to call it zoom manager, or maybe UI manager, and I'm going to drag and drop the UI manager in the canvas. There is an error. Okay, should be working now. Okay, here it is. Okay, so yeah, so now we can double click on the UI manager and we can start typing the code. The first thing we need a raycast. So just like all the stuff that we have learned till now, when we try to get some kind of collision in runtime, we're using raycast, right? So we throw a ray to some point and we just grab the heat information of that ray and I do some calculation based on that. Now to calculate a raycast heat with an UI manager, we'll need the graphic raycaster. Okay, so we need a graphic raycast. I'm just going to do graphic graphic raycaster, and then I'm going to call it raycaster. Okay. Next, we are going to add some selection point, right? So I'm just going to do a public transform selection point. The selection point is nothing but the center here. Okay, so the center of this location, and we can obviously do that by like some calculation, but I am preferring to do it manually here. But you can obviously just take the width here, right, and then calculate the center. That also works. I'm going to just create a yeah, I'm just going to create an empty game object. This is going to be in the center, so I'm just going to make sure it's in the center, and then I'm going to use this as a selection point. Okay, so this is the easiest way to do it, although you could, like I said, you could just do it from some math, right? Okay, next we're going to create a method which is going to calculate that if there was any kind of heat, right? But before that, I'm going to assign the raycaster. It's going to be the graphic raycaster that comes up with the canvas. I'll show you it in a moment. So in the canvas, you can see there is a graphic raycaster, right? So we need this raycaster. So that's what we are doing here. We are going to need an event system as well to get the pointer data. We already did that in our other script, right? You remember when we did the input handler, we had some kind of pointer event data. So we're going to do similar kind of stuff here. So yeah, for that we need two things. We need a pointer event data. So I'm just going to do a pointer event data, pointer data. Oops. P data. Okay. So we have a pointer event data, and also we need to have a event system. So I'm just going to do a event system, event system. Okay, good. So yeah, just like the raycaster, we're just going to initialize the event system. We're going to do event system equal get component event system. Again, the event system also comes up with the canvas component, the UI elements. Not the UI elements. UI elements is different in Unity. I am wishing to create some tutorial on that. This is called the canvas system, right? So Unity's UI component. So the Unity's UI component has a event system that handles all the UI behavior in Unity. Okay, then we have a pointer event data, so that is called a p data, right? So the p data is going to be a new pointer event data created by the event system. Okay, and we are going to change its position to center. Its position should be in the selection point, right? So what did we do? We created a pdata instance and then change its position to the center. What the center means here, right? With the selection point, where the selection point is, we're going to move the pointer there. So what it does, it is going to throw raycast throw ray from this point to the UI and try to figure out which UI is on this, right? Okay. Now we are going to create a method. We're going to do public bool on entered, and we're going to pass a game object called button here, and we're going to throw a raycast through this raycaster, right? So we're just going to throw a ray through this raycaster dot raycast, and we need a pointer data, which is basically the p data, and we also need a list where we can put the results. So let's create a list for raycast result, right? And we can simply pass that results here. Now this list is going to hold all the raycast information from this raycaster, so we can basically browse through the through this list. So we can browse through all the component in the list and check that if the result is basically the button, right? If the result is the button, we're going to do return right. We can do result.gameObject, maybe result.gameObject, right? So result.gameObject is the button, so we're going to return true, right? So we found that button. Otherwise we're going to return false, correct? So again, what did we do? We just created a method where we're going to pass the button that is going to be inside the button manager, right? So we're going to pass a button from the button manager, and we're going to check that that particular button is basically getting hit from the raycast that we are throwing from here. Okay, sounds good. Let's save it and then go back to button manager, where we're going to do the calculation that if there was any kind of raycast happened with this button. To do that, we're going to do if. Okay, we actually need a singleton for UI manager, just like we did for the data handler, remember? So in data handler we have this part where we have a singleton pattern to get an instance of the data handler. Just like that, we're going to create a singleton for the UI manager, so we can call the functions for this class from other classes, right? So to do that, we're going to first of all need a public static UI manager instance, right? And we're going to need a property. Actually, I can copy all the stuff from here, right? Copy all of them from here and paste it here. UI manager should be UI manager. By the way, there is a better way of doing it. You don't have to do it each time. We can actually create a parent class and extend that parent class from each of this manager to get a singleton by default. But I'm not talking about that in this course. Maybe in the future course where we learn more advanced stuff, we're going to talk more about this kind of patterns. Okay, that sounds good. Now we have a singleton for this class, we can now go back to the button manager, and we're going to check if the UI manager dot instance dot uh, on entered this game object, right? If we have entered into the raycast, if this button has entered into the raycast, we're going to scale it. So we're just going to do transform dot local scale is equal to vector 1 cross 2. Okay, else we are going to make the scale as 1. Save the project, go back to Unity, and if I run the project now, I need to check everything is correct. Oh, I need the selection point here, so I'm going to drag and drop the selection point in the UI manager, and let's run. As you can see, it got scaled, although the scale is really big. Yeah, you can tweak it down, but it's not looking really good. It's really, so really flickering. So we are going to fix that. Also, before fixing that, I don't want a few stuff here. We don't need any kind of vertical scrolling. Let's check if it fixed that issue. Right, so now it's working good. Right, so as you can see, the problem now is that it's really, first of all, it's really big, so we need to make it smaller, and also the animation is really buggy, right? So it's really making stuff look weird. So we need to make it smooth. We should add a smooth transition, so it's scale up and scale down slowly, not like in a disruptive way. Okay, so to do that, we need something called tween. So we need to go to the asset store to grab that asset. You can also do this with animation, but using this tweening software is really helpful, and they are really easy to use, and you don't have to think much about the animation, and you don't have to do a lot of stuff. It's a single line code and the animation is done. So to do any kind of tweening effect, I really recommend to use this kind of assets. So I'm just going to search for do tween. Right, so this is the asset. Okay. So you'll find it for free in asset store. Grab this in your project, and click on the utility panel and set up the software, the plugin. And I'm going to apply and close the window. Now we have the plugin. We can go back to our button manager where we did the scaling. Rather than doing a scale, we are going to now use the tween plugin. We are going to do using dg.tweening, and then here we are going to do transform dot do scale, and we're going to do vector 1 cross 2, and we're going to do it in 0.2 second, right? So the first value here is that how much you want to scale. The second value is that how fast or how slow you want to do the animation. The smaller the value, the faster the animation. Okay, and then I'm going to do it for the other one as well. Go back to Unity, run the project, and as you can see, it's now a lot better, right? So we can actually make the contents a little bit smaller so it does not look that weird because this is too big. I'm going to make all my contents height and width as 100, okay, or maybe 120. Now if I run the project, see what happens. Perfect. So as you can see, it's really smooth, and we can obviously change the time so that um, it's more smoother, you know? So we can make it 3 to make it a little bit slow, the animation. Right, yeah, so as you can see, it looks lot better now. Now the problem we need to fix now is that if we play the game again one more time, you can see that I can only go until this point, right? I cannot go to this too, right? This is really stretching. So if I go to this point and release the mouse, it goes back to there. So we need to fix that, but it's already 30 minutes, so I'm going to show you that part in the next tutorial.